Hello everybody, welcome to this instruction video. This video I want to show you part 2 of Ubuntu. Ubuntu is crochet along designed by Deirdre Uys, and this is the Scheepjes crochet along 2018. In part 2 of Ubuntu we're going to be extending the diamonds that we made last week in part 1. Part 1 got you to about here, these flowers, and in part 2 we're going to be extending the diamonds and going to be connecting those flowers to our work, extending this popcorn band and also these bands here with the popcorns at the end. That's what we'll be doing in part 2. I've got the large kit, so in my kit I've got river washed X and stone washed XL yarn. I'm using this in combination with a 5mm hook. If you've got the small or the medium kit, you'll have different yarn and you'll also be using a different size hook. Just check the written pattern for which hook you need. In essence, it's the same hook as you used last week. So I'll take you step by step through the rounds that make up part 2 of Ubuntu. So thank you for watching, and I hope it's a useful video for you. Round 9. Start by moving into the chain 2 space with a slip stitch and the actual chain 1 with another slip stitch. That's of course a chain 1 space, not a chain 2 space. I'm going to start the round by doing a chain 5. 2, 3, 4, 5. That counts as your, oh dear, my yarn is just hopelessly tangled at the moment. Okay, we'll see how this goes for the rest of this round. That chain 5 counts as a double treble and chain 1. Then again, twice over for another double treble in the same space. And 3. Just going to hook up the stitch marker again to mark my corner. Another chain 1 and a treble in the chain 1 space. That's the first half of the corner. We are going to work a treble in that first stitch before the chain 1 space. Then in the chain 1 space we work a popcorn. That's the chain 1 space. So that's 5 trebles. 2, 3, 4, and 5 trebles in that space there. My work is starting to get a little big here, so sometimes it's just not easy to get everything in front of the camera. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Go back to that first, pick up the loop and pull through. I'm going to skip the next stitch. That's this very first stitch immediately after the popcorn, and go to the second. In there work a treble. There you go. Next stitch, the second stitch, another treble. It's going to work 7 trebles. So the second one falls in the popcorn. Third stitch is the next one. And in the background you might hear my cat eating. 3, and this is 3. 4, 5, 6, and 7. That's 7 trebles, where the second one falls in the popcorn. So it's 2, 4, 6, 7. We're now going to do a front post triple treble around the front post. You see, I've just got this bit of yarn here. That's from the, this is a remainder of the last from the ball, and then that just kind of tangles itself up. We're going to do a front post triple treble around the front post triple treble from 2 rows down. So that means that's 1, 2, 3 times yarn over. Then around that stitch work a front post triple treble. That's 1, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, taking off 2 loops. To the back, going to skip a stitch, skipping that 1 stitch, and then work a treble. Going to work 2 actually, so that's 1 and 2. And now again work a front post triple treble, that's 3 times over, around that front post triple treble from 2 rows down. 1, 2, 3, 4 times, taking off 2 loops. You might have the idea that these trebles are very skew. You'll notice that as this work grows, that this kind of somehow, well, it does curve, but it's not as bad as it looks when you just look at these 2 stitches. So when your work is bigger, it'll not be quite as tilted as it looks now. You have to skip a stitch to the back. That's that stitch, and then work a treble. And this is the first of 3. So this is number 2. And number 3, the third treble, is going to be the first here of these stitches that you worked here to the back. So that's the third treble, falls in that first stitch there. That's the third treble. Okay. Now what we're going to do now, I'm just going to open up this loop a bit because I want to take the time to show you. So we're going to be working in these stitches here to the back. You're going to be working in the next 3 stitches, so those 3 stitches. But you're going to be working them whilst you're working in front of the chain 4 loop here between these flower petals. So what you're going to do is going to work a treble through here, picking up that stitch and pulling that stitch forward, so through the loop, through this gap here, that your chain 4 space really is to the back, so you can work in front of it. And then we're going to work in this stitch that I've got my hook in, and in the next stitch too, and in the stitch after it as well. So in those 3 stitches you're going to be working whilst this chain 4 loop is to the back of your work. So that's what we're going to be doing. So I'm going to yarn over for the treble, just hold on to that, and insert your hook through that loop and go to the stitch that you need, and that's the stitch I need. Now we're just going to pull that stitch through the loop, through that chain 4 loop space there. And now I'm going to finish the treble. Now it's important that you yarn over before you insert your hook, because let me just show you what happens if you don't. Now let's say that you insert your hook, pick up that stitch, and now you yarn over, you end up working a single crochet, or a double crochet actually I should say. Or what could also happen is you end up working over that chain 4 space, both things you don't want. So yarn over through that loop, pick up the stitch you need, pull it forward, and complete the treble. And you see you've got that chain 4 space there to the back completely unworked. The next stitch, that'll be easier because you already pulled that first stitch through. That is 2, and then number 3, the third stitch there. So you've got 3 trebles here. If you look here from your work from the front, from the back, you can see that space there. Chain 2, 1, 2. Now I'm just again going to show you. So let me just open that up. I'm going to skip 2 stitches to the back. Now this might be a little tricky, so really to see. So really push your flowers forward. You can really see them. You see, there's the last stitch you worked in. That's that stitch there. That contains that treble. You can just see the treble sitting in that stitch there. That means you're going to skip 2 stitches that you're going to skip, and then you're going to work in these last 3 stitches here to the back. So skip 2 stitches, and then these 3 we're going to be pulling through here. So you're going to be pulling that stitch through and then working in that stitch. That's what we're going to do. yarn over. Then take a moment to just double check that you've got 2 stitches that you're skipping there to the back, and then pull that stitch through chain space, pushing your chain space to the back, and complete the treble. So 1, and this here is number 2, and the third one there. That's the third one. This is what your work looks like. You've got 4 stitches left to the chain space. Work a treble on each of those stitches, and this first one might be slightly hidden here, so just double check that you get that stitch. But if we're going to work in these 4 stitches, work a treble on each. So that's 1, 2, 3, and 4. 4 stitches, and the end of my ball is really messing me up here. You can rather have a big ball than just that last 2 or 3 meters, because that kind of tangles itself up without you even wanting it to. And there we go. So 4 trebles onto the chain corner space. Work a treble, chain 1, and a treble. I'm going to move the stitch marker up. You can leave these stitch markers out if you're at this point in the pattern, so I can really see where those corners are, but I'm just going to keep on moving them. On this side, it's the same idea. We're again going to be working here in the back through these loops. To start with the first 4 stitches, work a treble on each of those. Of course, this first stitch here, so it's 1, 2, 3 trebles. I'm going to work 4 trebles, 4 trebles. The next stitch is going to be the first one here of these stitches here to the back. That's going to be the one that you're going to be working in. So again, yarn over through this chain space, and then into that first stitch, just grab it, pull it forward. I've got my yarn here, and then complete treble. That's 1, and do it with the second stitch, 2, and with the third stitch. There you go. Chain 2, 1, 2, and now we're again going to skip a stitch to the back, or actually 2 stitches to the back. Let me just show you. You're going to skip those 1, 2 stitches. Those 2 you're going to skip. Then you're going to work in these next 3 stitches. You're going to work again through the space, so those you're going to pull forward, and then you're going to have 1 stitch left here to the back, and that stitch we're also going to be working, but again in a normal way. But it's important to realize that you have 1 stitch left here. So you're going to skip 2, then pull those 3 through the loop, and then work in the 4th one afterwards. So yarn over for the treble. See how I'm skipping those 2 stitches there? 1, 2. Then just pull that stitch through the loop, push everything to the back, and then complete the treble. That's 1, 2, and the third one, that's 3. That's your flower petals nicely secured. We're now going to come just normal to the front again and work 4 trebles. But you see now why I told you there's another stitch left here to the back, because that stitch there is surprisingly easy to miss, because you've still got a stitch left there. Because you would be you could be forgiven for starting in this stitch because everything kind of falls over here, but you've got one stitch left still there to the back, starting in that stitch. That's the first one, so that's 1 and 2, oh dear, 2, 3 and 4. And this fourth treble falls in the stitch after the stitch that's in the front post trebles. You see, front post triple treble, I should say. So here's that front post stitch. There's a stitch that's in that stitch, and the stitch after, that's the one you've just worked into. So that's just a mark point for you. If you're in this stitch here, then I can guarantee you've missed that first stitch. Front post triple treble around this triple treble here. So it's 1, 2, 3 times yarn over around the front post stitch, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 times, taking off 2 loops. Skip a stitch to the back and work a treble. So 1 and 2. The next, again, a front post triple treble around this front post triple treble from 2 rows down. So 3 times yarn over around that stitch, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 times, taking off 2 loops. Skip a stitch to the back and then work the first of 6 trebles. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Number 5 here falls in the popcorn. That's number 5. There's a mark point for you. 5, and then 6 falls immediately after the popcorn. I'm going to skip a stitch. That's, you've got 1 stitch left here, 1 stitch, and then in the chain 1 space we work a popcorn. Got a knot there in the yarn where I just joined a new ball, so that's actually a knot that I made. And I'm going to just make sure that knot is kind of to the back. There we go, yeah. It'll disappear in the popcorn, so don't worry about it. And 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 trebles. Open up, hook up, and pull through. I've got 1 stitch left there, and that stitch there, work a treble on that. Let me just get into it properly. Treble in that last stitch. In the chain space I've got my stitch marker in here in a weird way, that's the problem. Then in that chain space work a treble, chain 1, double treble, chain 1 and double treble, 2, 3, chain 1 and another treble. I'm going to hook up my stitch marker. This corner is the same as the corner we started with. Now if I just zoom out a little bit so I can just show you what we've done. This is what you've just done. You've secured these flower petals here, leaving those chain spaces to the back open. And you've also done it on this side. And you've worked these triple treble front post stitches. All of that going to repeat on this side also. And I'll just see you here for that last, just for the closing. Almost at the end of the round. Just need to complete the popcorn here in the chain 1 space. In my chain 4 here, that's the first stitch, going to work a treble in there. then in the chain 1 space work another treble, chain 1, and close on the 4th chain here from the chain 5 with a slip stitch. That's not the entire stitch. There we go. And that completes the round. Round 10, we're again going to go with the slip stitch to the corner space, and then in the chain 1 itself also make a slip stitch. There you go. I'm just going to remove the stitch marker already, we'll need it in a moment. Chain 5, this is your double treble and a chain 1. 3, 4, that's a double treble, chain 1, and then another double treble in the chain space, and hook up the stitch marker. For the rest, the usual corner, chain 1 and treble in the space. There we go. Starting the straight edge. In the first stitch, do a treble, in the chain 1 space a popcorn. So 5 trebles. 2, 3, 4, and this is number 5. 5 trebles. Can now come back to the first one. Pick up the loop and pull through. You're going to skip the first stitch, that one, and the second, work the first of 19 trebles. That's quite a stretch. Here, number 2 here falls in the popcorn. And now I'm going to work 19. That will bring me to the chain 2 space of the flower. I don't know where I now am. I'm going to work a treble in every stitch. And this is 18. And the last one, number 19, is just before the chain 2 space. There we go. That's 19 trebles. I'm going to open up because I just want to show you where you're going to be working. We're going to be working a treble. We're going to be working it through the chain 2 space here above the flower petal, and through the chain 4 space to the back. First we're going to work a treble through the chain 4 space, that's before flower petal, so that one there. And then we're going to work a treble through the chain 2 space and the chain 4 space after the flower petal, so that's that one there. So you're going to be working a treble through both of those loops. First this one, and then that one. You'll just have to tilt your work slightly forward just to see exactly where those loops are. So let me just pick up my yarn again. So I'm going to yarn over for the treble, then through the chain 2 space, and then I've got the chain 4 here to the back. That's the first one. You see here's the other one, and then complete the treble. I'm going to do the same again through the chain 2 space, but now the next chain 4 space here to the back, pull up a loop, and then complete the treble. What you're doing is you're pinching this flower petal. We're going to work 8 trebles till we get to the chain corner space, and that there is the first one. Might just be slightly covered by the treble you just made. If that's the case, just push your treble to the side. 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, and then this here is number 8. So 8 trebles. Onto the chain corner space. That's again a treble, chain 1, and a treble. Going to hook up the stitch marker in the new chain corner space. And now we're going to do the same on this side as we did on that side. So I'm going to start with 8 trebles on the first stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, this is 7, and then number 8 here brings you just before the chain space. That is number 8. Now onto the chain space, we're going to do exactly the same. Just turn things a bit. So yarn over for the treble in the chain 2 space, and then you've got the chain 4 spaces here, those 2 to the back, and then complete the treble, and do the same with the one on the other side, and complete the treble. There we go. Going to continue, and on the next 19 stitches work a treble. That's going to bring us over here where we're going to work the popcorn and everything. That first one there is number 1. This 1, 2, continue until you have 19. 3, and then this is number 18. Number 18 falls on the popcorn, and then number 19 falls just after. Go 1 stitch left, going to skip that stitch and then work a popcorn in the next. 1. And this corner, this last bit actually here, I should say. It's exactly the same as we've done on many of these corners. These popcorns that are all on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're all on this this edge here. In the last stitch, before we get to the chain space, work a treble. Then in the chain space, work a treble, chain 1, a double treble, chain 1, a double treble, which is the new corner, chain 1, and a treble. So I move the stitch marker to my new corner. On the next edge, do exactly the same as we've just done. So here also, so catching these flower petals, we're going to do that on these sides also. And I'll just see you here for the last bit in the corner. Almost at the end of the round. Just need to complete the popcorn here in the chain 1 space. In my chain 4 here, that's the first stitch, going to work a treble in there. Then in the chain 1 space, work another treble, chain 1, and close on the 4th chain here from the chain 5 with a slip stitch. And that's not the entire stitch. There we go. And that completes the round. Round 11, slip stitch into the chain space and then slip stitch into the actual chain 1. And there we go. Just going to remove the stitch marker. Start by doing 5 chain. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, followed by a double treble in the chain space. Hooking the stitch marker back on. Chain 1 and a treble in the same space. In the first stitch work a treble, and in the chain space work a popcorn. This is your last round where you're going to be doing this popcorn. 3, 4 and 5 trebles. At least a popcorn in this position. You'll be making more, but not here. 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, come back and hook up and pull through. I'm going to skip the next stitch. That's going to be in that one there, and then go to the one after. Work a treble, and that's the first of 10. That's 1, here's 2, 3, so number 2 there falls in the popcorn. That was 3, 4 and 10. There we go. 10 trebles. Again, I'm going to work a front post triple treble around this one from 2 rows down, so from round 9. That's 1, 2, 3 times yarn over, then work that front post around the front post from 2 rows down, and then we're taking off 2 loops 4 times. I'm going to skip a stitch to the back and then work a treble. And if you just want to check if you're at the right place, this treble falls into the stitch that's made into the front post. I just pull that to the side there, you see that stitch? That's into this front post. That's where I just worked in. So that's just a checkpoint for you. That was the first treble. We're going to do 2, so also one in the next stitch. Work another treble. And now again a front post triple treble around this one from 2 rows down. It's 1, 2, 3 times yarn over, and then around the stitch from the front work a front post. 1, 2, 3, 4 times, taking off 2 loops. Skip a stitch to the back. See, I'm skipping a stitch there, and then work a treble, and that's the first of 18, and these 18 trebles will take you to the next chain 1 corner space. Just done 3, so I'm going to work 18. This is 4, 5, and 18. So I've now done 18 trebles. On the corner stitch, again work a treble, chain 1, and a treble. Take off the stitch marker, put it back in, and close. We're going to work this edge in a similar way. You're going to work trebles and then here work the front post. I'm going to start by doing 20 trebles. So that first one, remember to get that first one there. I'm going to work 20, so that's 1, 2, 3, this is 4, and this is number 20. Just worked 20 trebles. You want to just check if you're at the right position. The stitch you're in now, that stitch is the stitch that's after the front post triple treble here. So that's a stitch that's in the front post, In the stitch that's after, that's the stitch that you're in at the moment. So 20 trebles. Now I'm going to work a front post triple treble around this one here from 2 rows down. So that's again 3 times yarn over, and then take off 2 loops 4 times I mean. 4 times. Skipping a stitch to the back, skip a stitch, then work 1 and 2. Now again work a front post triple treble around this stitch here. 1, 2, 3. And 1, 2, 3, 4. Skip a stitch to the back and then work the first of 8 trebles. It all went well. Number 7 will fall in the popcorn. 3, this is 4, 4, and then 5, 6. Now stitch number 7 here falls in the popcorn. That's always good when these things work out. 7 and 8. You have 1 stitch left, going to skip that, and then in the chain 1 space work a popcorn. So 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 trebles. Going to complete the popcorn. In the next stitch, as that last stitch there, work a treble, and in the chain space work a treble, chain 1, a double, treble, chain 1, and another double. I'm going a little fast here because this corner we've done like forever. Each and every corner we do this. And chain 1 and a treble, and I move the stitch marker to the new corner. There we go. Everything you've just done on these 2 edges, repeat on the other 2, and then I'll just see you here just to do the corner. Almost at the end of the round. Just need to complete the popcorn here in the chain 1 space. In my chain 4 here, that's the first stitch, going to work a treble in there. Then in the chain 1 space work another treble, chain 1, and close on the 4th chain here from the chain 5 with a slip stitch. And that's not the entire stitch. There we go. And that completes the round. Round 12. Just going to remove the stitch marker already. What's important about round 12 is put your autopilot off, because we're going to do things just a little different here and there in round 12. So if you're going to do autopilot, you're going to make mistakes. We're going to start the corner in the same way as we've always done. So this is okay. Here your autopilot can still be on. We're going to do a slip stitch in the chain 1 and a slip stitch in the chain 1 corner space, so in both of those. Chain 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then a double treble in the same space to make your new corner. There we go. Chain 1 and another treble in the corner. And now's a good moment to switch your autopilot off. In the first stitch, I'm going to work a treble. the chain 1 space we have here. Up to now you've always done a popcorn in there. This time 2 trebles. That's 1 and 2. So 2 trebles in that chain space. We're now going to work 13 trebles. And the first one is going to be in that first stitch. Up to now we've always skipped that stitch, now we don't. So we work in that first stitch. So work a treble in there. That's 1, 2. Number 3 falls in the popcorn here. So that's a third one there. Your third treble will fall in that popcorn. So that's 3. Turn my work a bit because it's just getting just a bit bigger here. Or just a bit harder to get in front of the camera. 3, and then this is 4, and we continue until we have 13. 5, and the last treble. There you go. That brings us to the front post stitches here. So the last treble falls in the stitch before the front post stitches. I'm going to work a front post treble around this front post triple treble. On the next 2 stitches, going to work a treble. Your next stitch is in this one here. From the top it may look as though you're skipping a stitch, but you're not. Remember, because you work this front post stitch here in this or around the stitch, so you've already worked that stitch. So you're not skipping anything by doing that. So this is immediately your next stitch. So that's the first. I'm going to work 2. Also on the next work a treble. Next is another triple treble here, work a front post treble in there, or around it I should say. There. Now again another important moment to switch off your autopilot. We're going to do 21 half trebles, half, and that will bring us to the corner space. So immediately in the next stitch, and that's in that stitch there, work a half treble. This is the first of 19, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, and the last one, number 19. That brings us to the chain corner space. Let's remove the stitch marker. I'm going to work a corner here, a half treble, chain 1 and a half treble. So that's again half, chain 1 and a half treble. And in the chain 1 space, if you can't see, just pull open, you'll see there, just put your stitch marker. On the next 21 stitches, going to work a half treble, and that's going to bring you up to that stitch there, so just before the front post stitches. 21 half trebles, and that's the first stitch there. Be sure to get that first stitch. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, and the last half treble. There you go. The next stitch here is the front post stitch. Going to work a front post treble around that stitch. On the next 2 stitches, those 2 there, work a treble. So now you're going to work trebles again. So 1 and 2. Next stitch is again a front post stitch, front post treble around that. Front post treble. In the next 11 stitches, that's going to bring you to the chain space, work a treble. 1, 2, 3, and number 11. No stitches to skip, so in the chain space, that chain 1 space, work 2 trebles. So 1 and 2. On the corner space, work a treble in that last stitch, and then comes the corner. We've worked many times before, so that's a treble, chain 1, a double, treble, chain 1, a double treble, chain 1, and a treble. There we go. I'm going to move the stitch marker to my new corner. There we go. Again, repeat on the other 2 edges what you've just done, and then I'll just see you here for those last few stitches. Almost finished. Got one last treble to make. Now I'm onto the chain space. Here I work 2 trebles in that chain space, so still remember, no popcorns. 2 trebles in the chain space. The last stitch, that's chain 4 here from the last round, to work a treble on there, and then in the chain 1 space, another treble, chain 1, and close on the 4th chain with a slip stitch. Round 13, I'm going with a slip stitch into the chain space, and then with a slip stitch into the chain 1 itself. Just going to remove the stitch marker. I'll hook it back up in a moment. Chain 5. This counts as a double treble and a chain 1. So this starts we've done many times, and hook that stitch marker back up. There we go. Chain 1 and another treble in this same space. So that's the start of the corner, and this is another row to leave your autopilot off, because then you're going to be making some mistakes again. So to start the round, we're going to skip the first stitch. Now we've always worked that stitch, so this is different, so take note. That first stitch, we're going to skip that, and we're immediately going to go to the chain 1 space. In there we're making 2 trebles. So we're skipping that stitch and then go to the chain 1, where you're going to make 2 trebles. 1 and 2. The next stitch we're going to skip again. Also, this is a stitch we've skipped often after the popcorn. So that first stitch, we're going to skip that and then work 16 trebles from the second onward. So skip that and go to the next. You're going to work a treble, and that's the first of 16. So the next stitch, and that will bring you to the front post treble that we worked in the last round, where we're going to be working a popcorn. I'm going to work a treble in every stitch until I have 16 trebles. And the last one, this is number 16. So I've got 16 trebles there. Next up here is the front post stitch. In there we're going to work a popcorn. So in that stitch, from the front treble, work 5 trebles to make the popcorn. 3, 4, and 5. complete the popcorn. We've got 2 trebles here in the middle, going to work a treble on each of those, and then in the front post stitch work another popcorn. In those 2 stitches work a treble, 1 and 2, then in the front post stitch work a popcorn. 1, 2, 3, 4 trebles. I need 1 more and a bit more yarn. My yarn is really going fast. Almost to the end of the second ball already on this diamond, and that completes the popcorn. On the next stitches, those are 20 in total, which will bring you to the chain corner space here. You're going to work a half treble on each of those, so a half treble, very important here. Again, a place to make a mistake. So that first stitch, that one there, be sure to grab that one too. The very first stitch there after the popcorn. Work a half treble. That's 1. We're going to work 20. That will bring you to the chain corner space. That's 2, 3, 4, and 20. 20 half trebles. I'm now at the chain 1 corner space. I'm going to work a new corner. That's a half treble, chain 1, and a half treble in that chain space. I'm going to move the stitch marker to the new position. I'm just pushing my finger in there just to find where exactly that hole is. There it is. On the second edge of the diamond, we're going to skip the first stitch, and that's actually very nice because this first stitch after chain 1, that half treble after chain 1, that's just a horrible stitch to get into, so skipping that stitch is actually very nice. And then we're going to go to the second, so that's that stitch there, and work a half treble. So we're skipping the first one, go to the second, and that's the first of 21 half trebles. So on every stitch work a half treble, and that will again bring you to the front post stitch where we're going to work a popcorn. So that's going to be similar to what we've just done. So work 21 half trebles. And the last one. There we go, 21. Next stitch here is the front post stitch. That should be your next stitch. Going to work a popcorn in that stitch. So that's 5 trebles, 2 in the 1 stitch. You've done many popcorns, so I'm sure you know exactly how to do them. 5, come to the first stitch and pull that loop through. You have 2 trebles before you have a front post treble. Going to work a treble on each of these and another popcorn on the front post. So on that one work a treble and another, and then on the front post stitch here work a popcorn. So I'm making 5 trebles, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Open up, come back to the first one, pick up the loop and pull through. Really just coming to the end of the yarn here, so it's a bit tangled again. I'm going to have to attach my third ball soon. On the next stitches, I believe 15 stitches if I recall, I'm going to work a treble, and that's going to bring us to the chain 1 space over there. So immediately on that first stitch, work your first treble. So 1, 2, 3, and this is 14, and number 15 here is just before this chain space. in the chain 1 space work 2 trebles. 1 and 2. Up to the corner, I'm just going to turn my work a bit. In the last stitch here, before we get to the chain 1 space, work a treble. And yes, this is asymmetric with respect to what happens here after the corner, but it's correct, so trust the pattern, it's correct. Deidre knows what she's doing. In the corner itself, work a treble, chain 1, treble, sorry, double treble I mean, another double treble, hook up the stitch marker, chain 1 and a treble. There we go. And then this corner, especially the second half here of the corner, is the same as what we started with. So on your next straight edge you're going to repeat everything we've just done. So skip that first stitch, here in the chain space work 2 trebles, skip a stitch, and then come back down and work your popcorns. Go all the way around, and when you get, where is it, here to the corner, I'll just see you here for this last bit. I'm almost back to the start of the round. I've got one more treble to do before the chain space. In the chain space I work 2 trebles and 2. Then on my last stitch, which is the chain 4 here, I work a treble. And there you go. Sometimes it goes easier to get that stitch in there than other times. Then to complete this corner, treble in the chain space, chain 1, and close on the 4th of those 5 chains with the slip stitch. There we go. Now, important, leave your yarn attached because you're going to continue in the next round with the same color. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to open this up a bit. I'm just going to move my stitch marker into that loop so that nothing happens to it between now and next week when we do part 3. That brings us to the end of the rounds for part 2. We've now worked the diamond up, so we've now got a medium-sized diamond. Actually, if you've got the XL kit, it's already quite a large diamond. But for this one, you're finished for the moment, but you've got 5 more to do. And if I just show you where I'm at with these, because they are all very big. So I've got a whole pack of these, all my diamonds, and they're all waiting for next week when we continue with part 3. And then leave your yarn balls attached because we're just going to continue with these next week. So I'm just going to fold these out of the way. So I've got loads of diamonds. If you want to, you can block this diamond, but you don't have to. You'll notice it's already much flatter than it was at the end of part 1. So that brings us to the end of part 2. Next week we'll continue with the diamonds. So thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.